Hello, tonight we're going to read Rock by Rock, The Fantastical Garden of Nek Chand. Nek Chand was just one man in a sea of people in the busy city of Chandigarh, India, but he was different from his neighbors. Why was he sifting through that pile of rubbish? What did he want with all those broken parts that the factory threw out? Where could he be going with all those rocks? He was going to a hidden place. He'd found it one day when he was feeling homesick. India has always been a country made up of followers of many different faiths, including Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. But when Nek was a young man, some people decided life would be more peaceful if these groups were separated, and so they divided India into pieces. They named the northernmost piece, the land where Nek and his family lived, Pakistan. Pakistan was meant to be a homeland for Muslim people, but Nek and his family were Hindu. They no longer belonged in their village, so, like millions of others, they fled south to India, just as Muslims fled India for Pakistan. But Nek never stopped missing his village with its paths that turned to streams during the rains and the dense forests full of rosewood trees. Some days the missing was almost too much to bear. One of those days, many years later, Nek cycled out to the city's edge and discovered a scrubby patch of forest. He patted the twisting trunks. He picked his way over roots coiled like fat snakes. He startled birds into flight and set monkeys chattering. He felt like he had as a boy when he'd explored woods like these near his village. That missing moved from his heart into his hands, and his hands knew what to do. He pulled away vines. He swept up fallen branches. He built a ring of stones around the edge of a space he cleared inside the forest. The circle was wobbly and the stones didn't match, but it felt so much better to him than the squares and straight lines of the city. After long days at his job helping build new roads for the city, he collected stones that the road crews dug up and cast aside as they laid new pavement. Nek loaded them onto the back of his bicycle, pedaled many miles out to his hidden place, and added them to the ring, or lined a new path. On days off, he'd pedal all the way out to the lake at the edge of the city, or even the river beyond it. There the stones had been worn smooth by the water, and there he'd found the ones that reminded him most of home. He'd tied these onto his bicycle too. Soon he had so many rocks that his hidden place was like a garden of stones. He wondered if he could do more than arrange the rocks. He wondered if he could make something from them. So he began to collect other materials as well. When the road crews discarded extra cement powder, he took it to his hidden place. Bits of broken dishes or tiles, they also went into his bicycle basket. When he found some colorful wire bangles that had been broken by a careless delivery man, he took those too. He hunted for treasures in the rubble of villages that had been abandoned and torn down to make room for the growing city. Once again, his hands knew what to do. He began to make art from all the items he gathered. Beautiful things took shape from all the refuse the city did not want. A tiny village like the one he left behind as a boy. Animals from bundles of cloth and broken pots. An army of laughing soldiers fashioned from construction wire, concrete, and broken plates. Graceful dancing ladies, the broken bangle pieces artfully arranged to adorn them in colorful saris. Walls from old cement and burlap bags, their doorways placed low so that each time Nek passed from one space to another, he was reminded to be humble. He made the path twist and curve, unlike the straight roads he spent his days building for the city. The more he created, the more he wanted to make. He worked through the night, burning old tires for light, and to keep the snakes from creeping too close. He built and built and built. He dreamed bigger than one man could manage alone, but he was not discouraged. He drew plans for waterfalls and streams topped with figures of the gods and goddesses that filled the stories he'd been told as a boy. As his garden grew in secret, his heart grew fuller, happier than it had been in a long, long time. But the city, with its straight lines and long streets and crowded squares, was growing too. One day, another crew of workmen began laying out the path for a new road. They hacked and slashed their way through the stand of scrubby forest at the edge of the city. Then they stumbled into Nek Chan's secret garden. The workers scratched their heads. They double-checked the maps they'd been given by the city. Who had put these fairy houses here? And this zoo bursting with animals? Or the maze of tunnels and paths and arches and stairs? Confused, the workers reported what they had found. Though he loved his garden, Nek had always expected that a day would come when he would be forced to give it up. So he came forward and explained what he'd been doing in the forest. But instead of destroying his garden, many of the city's leaders were enchanted by Nek's creations. They wanted to see it grow. They abandoned their plans for this portion of the growing city. They asked Nek to leave his job building roads so he could carry on with his rock garden. They even gave him workers to help. Together, they dug wells and built a waterfall. They built giant swings and a theater. Soon, people from all over the city, all over India, and all over the world came to visit the garden. They smiled at the laughing army, and they skipped around the dancing ladies and little houses. Children brought items from their families had thrown out to see if Nek could use them in his sculptures. His garden grew. But not everyone loved what Nek had made. As more people came to see the garden and the man who'd created it, one city official grew envious. Why should a lowly road builder be allowed to take land that did not belong to him? Why should he be permitted to take cement and boards and materials that belonged to the city, no matter that they were going to be thrown away? And why should important, busy people be expected to take their time and wander through Nek's garden like common people, stooping through Nek's silly, small doorways, climbing up and down so many stairs? This city official grumbled and complained until some others were convinced. Together they made a plan. They ordered that a road be built through the garden. This road would be open only to cars carrying very important people who couldn't be bothered to walk and stoop and get lost in the garden the way Nek intended. Machines arrived to knock down the walls and lay pavement. What could Nek do? He was only one man, after all. Or was he? A new army came forth. School children, teachers, doctors, rickshaw drivers, and shopkeepers encircled the garden. Old and young, rich and poor wanted to protect what Nek had created. Together they linked arms, clasped hands, and stood as silent and staring as Nek's statues while the demolition equipment growled and smoked. They refused to move until the bulldozers were shut off and the crews sent home. The road was never built, and Nek's garden continued to grow. The end. Hope y'all enjoyed. A special shout out to William and Charles. I love y'all. Good night.